welcome to another episode of the Rise and Side podcast. I am happy to have one of my good friends, a fellow FM, on here, Mr. Jesse Pinsey. How do I pronounce your last name?
Pisecny.
Pisecny. That's a very Italian last name. I love it.
It's Italian and Czechoslovakian mix. That's the family background.
Okay, Pisecny. All right, Jesse, I'm happy that you're on this call. I'm happy you're on this call because realistically, I've heard your story a couple times and I share it on multiple occasions with my trainers and with anyone that I hear who's gone through some like downfalls. And we've all gone through downfalls. Like if you're in the seat, like you've gone through the downfalls and you've made it past it to get to this point. But I want you to share it and kind of talk about what you've done in the last couple of years and like where your journey's taken you. I know that you just recently became a pro trainer as well. So that's amazing. And just talk about your journey in the fitness industry. So like, just introduce yourself. Tell us a little about yourself.
My name is Jesse, fitness manager over at Newmarket Good Life. I've been there for about 4 years. I was a personal trainer for 6.5 years, I want to say. End of 2013, beginning of 2014, down in the city at Dufferin and Finch. And then most recently, also took on working for CanFit Pro as black belt, as a pro trainer, and certifying new trainers getting into the industry. So nice. Those are the hats that I do. I spend most of my time doing.
That's dope, man. So what inspired you to become a personal trainer?
Well, that's a long-winded question. Because like I was thinking about that question when you told me you were gonna ask it. I was like, man, where do I even start this one? Because there was so many influences at that time. But initially, like I was a sports guy, I was a soccer guy, as most guys who get into the industry are. Honestly, I couldn't care less about training at the time. I was just playing soccer. I was like, I love this. Like fitness wasn't a big thing. I mean, I was strong. I was in gym class, I was benching, I was deadlifting, but it was all like I wanted to play sports and I wanted to go home. I wanted to eat beef patties and play video games. Like that was my nights. I was happy with that. And I had this gym teacher who was a black belt or a pro trainer, PT pro trainer for CanFit. And at the time he had used training to pay through college. And he kept telling me, he's like, yo, you should get into working out. You should get into working out. Like you'd be good at it and like, get into the industry. And I just pushed it off. For 2 years, I was working out and I was like, nah, I have no interest. I just do this to maintain so I could play soccer better. End of grade 12, I was like, wasn't doing too good. I wasn't doing too good in high school. I wasn't the smartest guy in terms of like, I didn't show up to class. And he kept telling me, he's like, you're smarter than that. You just don't go to school. I don't understand. And I'm like, I'm getting into the trades, typical stereotype. I'm like, my whole family's in trades, my dad's, my uncles. I'm like, I'm going into trades. I'm not doing it. So I graduated, I took a year off and I got into the trades. I did framing, I did landscaping. I worked at a grocery store overnights for some extra pay.
Wow.
And I got into this like massive argument with one of my managers at the grocery store one night. I'm like, you know what? I can't do it anymore. And I went home. I jumped on the Ontario College website. I just started scrolling. I'm like, what can I do? Because like my grades aren't good enough to get into university, but I could get into something because I can't do this anymore. And I went across like health and fitness. I looked at kinesiology, health and fitness, all that stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I was good at working out. Gym class always scored high. I'm like, I actually showed up every time. Health and fitness relies heavily. There's a huge fitness component to it. There's a biology component. Biomechanics. Fortunately, I took bio and physics, so I was pretty like at least I understood it a little bit. And I was like, let me give this stuff a shot. So I jumped in, I took the course. I kept going with it. It was a year and a half long. I did a fast track. I took the summer, I worked right through the summer for it. And through the course, I started liking it more and more. And I was thinking, shit, what am I going to get into next? What's the next step of this? And one of the women who were teaching me put us through a job fair. She set us up to a job fair. And I showed up and like, there was Good Life, there was LA, there was like universities if you wanted to get into kin and all that. And the Good Life was down the street from my house, like a 20-minute bus ride. I was like, you know what, let me try this personal training thing. So I applied into it. I got a call back that night. Surprisingly, I was kind of shocked about it. And I did a phone screen and 3 days later I had an interview and 4 days later I had an offer for an internship because like he brought me on as a trainer, but he was like, I know you have to do your practicum, your interning 160 hours. So he's like, if you want, I'll put you on payroll, and you can do your intern at the same time. I'll sign off on your hours. So I was just like, yeah, you know what? Let me give it a try. And I jumped in, and you know what? Even at that moment, I was like, this is 1 year max. Like, I don't think I'm gonna stick this out. And then my first year, I think you've heard the story. My first year was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Like, it was an it was an up and down. And you know what? I gotta say, people who told me that I should just quit probably are the reason why I didn't quit. um, like I was like, I had just spent 15,000 out of pocket on college. I had gotten into this job and I was doing awful. It was like 3 months in. I did all these consultations. I was like, man, I'm like, I don't get it. I'm doing everything I'm taught. And I just couldn't sell. I couldn't sell training for the life of me. And my mom actually went out of her way to bring a coworker from her job that had done the course, got into the industry, failed, got out of the industry, and started to work at the same job as her to come and tell me why I should quit. And I was just like, I can't. I'm like, no. I'm like, you know what? No. And like I said a few other words. I'm not gonna say them on here because like it got pretty heated. It was a pretty heated argument. And I decided, I'm like, you know what? Nah, I'm gonna stick this out. So I went in, and within the next 2 weeks, I sold my first client.
There you go.
An old school 144. So crushed it. I was on a momentum, and I just kept going and I kept going. And within like 6 weeks, I had sold 7 agreements. But the problem was I had gone so long without getting paid that I remember I got my first commission check and paycheck. It was like $2,500. And when I looked at my accounts on payday, I was still minus 100 in my checkings.
Oh,
and I was like, what just happened? I'm like, I just made 2,500. Where'd it go? And I was 19, 20 years old at the time. So like I had no savings, I had no backup money. I had one credit card that was maxed out from school. I was in overdraft because I was making car payments and insurance payments, and like I was helping out, like I was contributing to the house. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how does this happen? So I had sat down with my manager, actually, Chris, and I was like, dude, I don't get it. I was like, how do I do this? And I showed him my accounts, and he just like, I could see it in his face. He was like, oh shit. He's like, you need more clients. He's like, you need more. So I kept going. So I built my way up to 16 clients by 6 months. So I was like 6 months, I was at 16 clients. I was crushing it. But I did the old school financing plan, 6-month contract, 12-month finance. And on month 7, I think I lost 8 clients. And I went right back down to 7 or 8 clients. And I was like, uh-oh. I'm right back in the gutter. I just started making positive money regularly, and now I'm going back down. And that was my career for like the first year. I pulled a trainer aside. She was an older trainer there, and I'm like, yo, how do you renew clients so efficiently? Because like I just got screwed. I thought I was doing well, and like I sat down all these people and they all said no. And she taught me how to do the financing plans properly. She's like, this is what you're doing, this is what you should be doing, this is how you maintain. So I went through that total up and down probably twice in that first like year and 4 months.
Oh boy.
Before I finally got a grasp on like how to maintain and keep my business. And like through that whole time, I was still thinking the doubts of like, should I stay? Should I go? Is this for me? I was working overnights at Sobeys to try and make extra money because I was like, I don't have enough. So I was doing 10 to 5 at Sobeys overnights, and I was coming in for 10 to 8 for the old school PT onboarding and all that. Jeez. And I was like, I was sleeping on the bus ride in between. And when my parents didn't have the car, I didn't have to work, I was taking their car to work because I was sharing with them at the time. So that was the ride for about a year and a half. And like, yeah, I was still unconvinced. I was still sure I wasn't going to stay in the industry. I was like, I'm done. I'm like, I don't think I could keep doing this. If this is my life, I don't want it anymore. And it was that year and like 4-month mark where I was like, fuck, I've been saying I'm going to quit for like a year and 6 months and I haven't yet. I'm probably not quitting. I'm like, I'm going to stick it out. I'm like, if I wanted to leave, I would have left. But it was because I enjoyed it so much. Like the times that were good, helping the clients, the friendships and all that. I was like, there was so much value and so many people that I met that were like, that were crazy intelligent. Like a lot of my clients were more successful, more educated, more well spoken, people that were teaching me during those sessions just as much as I was teaching them. And I was like, I can't walk away from this. I've learned I'm learning way too much. Like I feel way better about myself in this job than anything else. And like that eventually progressed into assistant manager and then fitness manager, and like where I am now in Newmarket. Um, it was a lot of it was moving up was due to salary and consistency. Like, you know, I love training people, but I also realized too that at the time I was 24 years old when I was applying for assistant, 23 years old when I was applying for assistant manager. And the main two motivators for me were I went to the bank, I was finally in a good position. I just bought a new car, I was out of debt. I was like, you know what? I want to start looking at the next steps in life. I want to move out on my own. I want to buy my own place. Like, how do I get that ball rolling? Met with some financial advisors, and they all said the same thing. If you want to buy a property, salary is always going to do better than hourly. So start looking
Mm.
at what opportunities you have. And I didn't want to leave the industry. I wasn't sure I wanted to be a manager, but I didn't want to leave the industry because I liked it. So I took the shot at assistant manager anyways. And I was like, you know what? Let's do it. I know it's a sales role. I'm in. I'm hands down. Let's go. And I ran that for 2 years. I learned a lot. I learned a lot in that 2 years. 2018 to 2020 was like probably my biggest growth in terms of my own maturity, because I went from, you know, the young 22-year-old, 21-year-old trainer to, you know, moving into the 25, 26 years old salary job. A lot of the trainers I was working with were newer than me now. I was no longer the new kid in the team. I was like a little bit more experienced, and I got the opportunity to teach and onboard a few new trainers. And I ran that for about 2 years when I got the call from the GM over in Newmarket. She was an old friend of mine who worked with me at Dufferin when we first started. And I had a few opportunities to move to FM yet, but I had said no. Just weren't clubs that I liked. I went in, took a look. They weren't like things that I thought that I was gonna enjoy. So when she called and she said, "Look, we got our FM over here is leaving. She's on a leave of absence right now, but she's formally resigned. She's not coming back. I've already told Christian about you. You need to apply when the job opens. You'd kill it up here." So I was like, well, I had just been offered a job at LA Fitness at that time. And I don't think I ever told Christian that either. But I met a girl at a party who was opening a club, opening an LA Fitness down the street from my house. And her
Hmm.
job was club opening and going.
Okay.
And like we had had a few drinks, and she was like, "Yeah, you know, I moved from club to club. I open them, I hire, and then I leave." And she's like, "We're looking for a manager. If you have experience, you should apply." And I'm like, "Well, what's the job criteria? Like, what's the pay like?" And I was asking all the normal questions, and I was
Yeah.
considering it because I hadn't found a club in Good Life that I wanted yet. So I had done up my resume and I was ready to go and everything. And then I got that call from the GM over in Newmarket about it. And
Wow.
that was a wrap. At that point, I was like, yeah, I'm like, it's too coincidental. I've been looking for this opportunity. I loved working with this employee when she worked with me here. I'd love to get a chance to work with her again. I think we'd crush it as a team. And then I took the application. I met Christian, and the rest was history.
Wow. That's
Yeah, and
straight
that's I
fire,
got to
man.
FM.
So what would you
Mhm.
say is your biggest challenge from transitioning from trainer to managing others? And how did you handle it?
Um, the biggest challenge was the relationship building. Like I went into a club where they had 8 trainers and only one was at ours. None were at 120. None of them were hitting their contracts. Like none of them were doing what they needed to do to be successful, and none of them wanted to because they were all so comfortable and so used to managers coming and going. They wanted to just get what they had done and go home at the end of the day. So building those relationships as a new person coming in to a team that had worked together for 2 or 3 years and all felt the same way, leaving a club where I had been for 6.5 years, where I had strong relationships with the members, I had strong relationships with the trainers, with the management. Like we had been together for so long, most of us, that I was comfortable. I knew a lot more. And that was tough because there's a trust component. There's a trust component to the new guy coming in. Like these, I need them to trust me, but they don't even know me. So I went in, I did the wrong thing. I went in guns blazing, man. I went in hot. I was like, one-on-ones, what's your hours? What's your client gain? You know, what's your weekly focus looking like? How many prospecting blocks are you doing? And I just started running them. I'm like, nah, we're fixing this. We're fixing this. We're changing this. We're changing this. And then the GM, she wasn't mad at me, but she told me, she's like, yeah, you know, I heard a few guys talking in the back, and like they, you know, they're talking about how you're being an asshole and they don't really like you. She's like, I'm not gonna tell you how to do your job, but she's like, I think you need to focus on getting them to like you a little bit more before like trying to get them to change. And that was tough. That's the first time in a long time, at least that I can remember, where I'd ever walked into a place and the first impression from people was, I don't like them. So I
Mm.
was like, that was a struggle for me. I was like, I'm like, I've never been in this position. How do I get somebody to like me? Like, how do I build that relationship? Right? Like, it's a little bit different when it's at work. So
Yep.
it took me a long time. I got lucky that during that first 6 months, one of the only benefits that came out of the COVID lockdown was I had a lot of time to talk to these people non-work related, to get to know them on a personal level, check in on them regularly without having to be like, what's your client schedule like? What's your hours like? And that built up the relationships a lot stronger. And like ended up building some really strong relationships with some good people. Unfortunately, most of them still left after a few lockdowns due to the lockdowns, but
Yeah.
I was able to adapt after that and say, now I know how to do this better for next time. Like I know what the next step is. And
Yeah.
that was my biggest struggle. Like it was different.
Yeah, that's the one thing I know. For me, I know that coming in guns a blazing is what you want to do, and it's just like, all right, I got to build relationships too. And it's hard because when you're a manager, automatically people aren't going to like you, and it's just like there's no reason for
Yeah.
it. Just like I don't like you because you're a manager. It's like, what the heck, man? Like I'm just doing my job, just how you're just doing your job. Like we
Yeah.
can talk about anything outside of work, but like when we get in work, my job is to just manage what you're doing, and your job is just to manage your clients. If you do your job perfectly, that means that I really don't have to do my job. And so the fact that I'm doing my job,
Yeah.
it means there's an issue in your job. And that's why I've always tell people that it's like protect our relationship. If you want a friendship with me, protect it. Because that way I don't have to be a manager friend. It's like, okay, you know what you're doing. I've coached you. I've done everything with you. Now we can actually talk and build relationship versus manage. Hey, how come you're not hitting your hours? How come you're not doing this? Are you okay? It's like the question that I
Yeah.
generally will ask people now. It's like, okay, hey, what's up? How are you? How's the weekend? But I find myself having to slow myself down because I am very business oriented. And
Yeah.
like I'm okay talking about like let's just talk about business. Like you don't need to know my personal life. We're good.
Yeah.
But like in this current society we're living in, people want those relationships and be able to do that. So like I can understand going from managing your own business to managing other people, definitely a big transition.
Oh, 100%. Right. And like you've been around a long time. I've been around a decent amount of time. And like, yeah, that was the way we were taught. It was business. It
Yeah.
wasn't personal. It was like, this is business. Don't take it personal. Like, get to where you need to be, and then we can shoot the shit in the lunchroom behind closed doors when you get there. And
Yep.
that's just what I knew. And I was, as a new FM, you also want to come in and like you want to make a change. You want to take a club and you want to fix it. You want to show your value.
Yep.
So going in hot, I was also thinking, I'm like, I'm gonna make a name in this place. Like I'm gonna show, because like I had heard some pretty bad rumors about Newmarket not being a good club. So I'm like, I'm gonna fix that when I'm here. I'm gonna make sure that people don't say that anymore about this place.
Yeah.
And that was another underlying motivation of the guns a blazing. And I was like, yeah, hindsight, like intentions were good, process was not. So I'll
So
keep
what would
that
you
in mind for the next time.
so what would you say what's the one experience that you've had with a client or team member that had a lasting impact on you?
All right. So I got a good story for you. And actually I've got a prop for you on this one. So this story, this was a client of mine. I trained in January of 2026. 2016. And his story was crazy. His story was beyond crazy. Like when I had met this guy, you know, he was successful in his business. He was like traveling the world half the year for work. He was training with me, paying my rates perfectly fine. He's doing what he wanted when he wanted and everything. And like, you know, when you train somebody for 6 months, you get to know them pretty decently.
Yep.
And I guess I don't remember exactly what I said, but I guess he had seen in my eyes, because that was in my 14-month stint where I was going through the ups and downs. I guess he could see that I was going through frustrations. So we were at the end of our contract, our 6 months, and he wrote me a note. And I still have it. That's what I was gonna say. It's like that's the prop. I still have it right next to me and a book. And basically what had happened is when he was 19 years old, his parents kicked him out. So he was living in hostels, he was living in homeless shelters, he was living in parks and stuff like that. And he was trying to, like, he was working dead end jobs trying to make money. And through that he had considered doing certain things to himself that most people would in those situations. And he worked his job through all the way through from 19. He put himself through Harvard University, ended up
Wow.
leaving with 2 PhDs, establishing a career, getting married, like all these positive things. And it was at the time, I heard the story and I was like, this is crazy, but it didn't resonate with me too much. I was just like, I was 20. I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't connect to that as emotionally as I did. But I had told him that, like, I've never traveled the world before. I never left the country. Like the furthest I'd ever been was Montreal. And he wrote me that note. And on the last session, he gave me a book, The Guide to Travel Europe. And he wrote me this letter about, like, being frustrated and how the world can be tough, but with resiliency and like pushing hard, you can accomplish anything, and not to give up on yourself, and not to let your anger get the best of you, not to let your
Mm.
frustrations take advantage of your life. And he's like, if you ever need a head to a head to bounce your ideas off of, or somebody to communicate with, he's like, you can always call out, you can always reach out to me. I'm always here to help. He's like, I love to see passionate people be successful. And I hate to see people get frustrated because they don't fully understand how to see the world for what it is yet. And he's like, and you have a lot of potential and maturity, and you're just stuck in this spot right now mentally that you're not able to see down the line what your potential is. And he's like, if I can help you do that, give me a call. So I was like, I didn't really understand the value of it until probably 2018. I was doing a cleanup of my room, and I found the book, which I got right here, by the way. And I went to go open it, and then the note fell right out. And I was like, what's this? Like, what's the note? I don't remember this. So I opened it and read it. And I was like, again, this is 2 years later now. A lot has changed in that 2 years. And I read the note and I was reading the story, and I was like, I started like tearing up a little bit. I'm like, man, this guy actually went through it. But if you saw him, you
Wow.
never would have known.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. And from that point on, I was like, I looked at it as there is people out there who struggle more than me and somehow manage to ring it back in and still be successful, to lock in and go. And I'm like, I need to learn from that. So every once
Yeah.
in a while, I take a peek at that note if I need to.
That's dope, man. Wow. Yeah, that's in this game. I find that a lot of people, a lot of trainers, they start and they don't remember that the struggle, and they don't know it's a struggle. Like it's easy to work. Like if you've ever worked like any other job that's like hourly, you don't
Yeah.
really need to struggle because you just show up, you get paid. And if you're not happy with your pay, you work harder and you get a raise. And it's very like, okay, it's rudimentary, but okay, here's my wage band. I can make, if you're making $20 an hour, I can make $22 an hour. It's like, yay. But here with the income
Yeah.
potential that you have here, it's like, it's not given, it's earned. So if you're like,
Yeah.
if you don't work for it, you don't get anything. But the work requires so much growth out of you. And I always tell people, I'm like, it's all about growing. Like it's hard because you can't kind of like you can't fake it. You have to do
Yeah.
the work. You have to grow. You have to read books. You gotta like look at yourself internally, and be like, okay, what am I doing wrong here? How do I get better at this? And a lot of trainers either quit or they get better or they challenge themselves. Like you said, in terms of the fact that everyone's telling you to quit, most people do quit because it's like, you know what, this is not working for me. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, it's your mindset. So that's powerful, man.
For sure. Yeah. And like, again, sometimes like you need to take that, like that energy and be like, nah, you know what? I'm gonna prove some people wrong here, because you just never get to see what you're capable of if you don't.
It's true. So now, how do you stay motivated and continue to grow in your role as a personal training manager?
The number one thing for motivation for me is education, whether it's courses, whether it's books, whether it's communicating, talking to guys like you and like other people. Like that's been my bread and butter, is like learning and interacting with more successful managers. Like I remember when we all did Impact Speaker, like last year, like that was the first time in a long time I sat in a room and I looked around and I'm like, this is the room I want to be at. This is the table I want to sit at, because I walk in and I'm like, I'm the least skilled person in the room. I know the least. I'm like, we had, I think you were in there. It was Eric Dip, it was Eric and Christian, it was Adam Simmons, like all these high performing managers and regional managers. And there's a lot more, by the way. I know I didn't name them all, but it was like 90% of the class. So
Yeah.
we'd be here forever. And it was just really cool to sit down and like and talk with everyone. Like me, you and Christian at one point we hit up for burritos, I think it was, and like,
Yep.
or for wraps, and like just that those one-on-one times to communicate. I was like, I live for those, man. When I go to those education courses,
Yep.
I love connecting and like getting a chance to talk to you guys and learn what all of you guys are doing, because you're all very successful. Like every one of you is very successful in different ways and has different ways about going about it. And beyond the education from the course, which it's always fun to learn something new, building those relationships with other managers and other people in the industry who are super successful motivate me to go take more courses. And then I top
Yep.
off for the books. If I'm in a situation where like I want to take a course but nothing's coming up, or I'm not super interested in what's on the docket, like I've had Eric recommended me a bunch of books. Sometimes I see you post some on there. Like I saw in your with Jeff Mellis, you referenced Tim Grover. I'm like,
Yep.
I just got through Relentless a few days ago. I'm like,
Great book.
those things, oh, that thing is phenomenal. It's like that's the motivational stuff. So like I have Christian to thank for pushing me into education, because that was something I didn't do a lot earlier into my career. And then Eric for pushing me into reading, because that's something that I also probably had. I think I touched one book since like 2010 before that.
Yeah,
Like,
Eric is
yeah,
I could thank Eric for reading, because realistically, that's one thing where I'm like, man, I need to work on this. And so legit, I've
yeah,
been like I'm on a 10-minute a day read a book. Every day I read a book at least for 10 minutes. I put a timer on and I read. So like, the first thing I do in the morning, or I sit in a massage chair and it's a 15-minute book. And I'm like, okay, massage chair, 15 minutes, read. And I'm like, disciplining yourself to read is a very difficult thing, because you don't make anything off of it, but you get so much from it at the end.
yeah, exactly. It's like there's such a long-term like ROI on that you don't realize you're getting from the discipline of reading. The idea of being able to just sit down is, if I read something, I can read it over 5 or 6 times, and I could go back and read it again and interpret it differently, maybe. And like it's so much coming out of that like I regret not getting into that sooner.
Yeah. Well, it's never too late. That's one thing. I can say
Yeah,
the book, like every single time I see Eric post a book, the first thing I do is I actually order it on Amazon, and then I just get rid of it. Like I'm just like, okay, it's already ordered, it's done. And every single time I have Erin in my office, she'll be like, "Oh, can you like, oh, this book is really good." All right, I take out my phone, I go right on Amazon. I'm like, all right, it's gonna be at my house, because I'm like,
yeah,
and I tell him like, if I ever see a book and you suggest a book, if I see Chris Flood post a book, I automatically order it, and I'm like, okay, I'll get to it and I'll read it at some point, because I know if I don't do that, it's like a library, right? How do you build a library? It's just you get books, and at some point you're gonna read it throughout your life. I always thought like you buy books and you have them. And at some point in your life, when you absolutely need it, that's when you'll read it. And
yeah,
the perfect example of that, I have a book by Brian Tracy called The Psychology of Sales. Amazing book. Probably the best book on sales I've ever read. Now, I bought that book back in 2018
yeah,
for $4 at a bookstore that was closing. I had it in the bottom of a box for the last for since 2018. I had it at the bottom of a box. I found it in 2022 when I was going through YouTube listening to like some sales stuff, and I found Brian Tracy. I'm like,
yeah,
this guy's really good. Does he have any books? I look it up. I'm like, Psychology of Sales. I look on Amazon, $88. I'm like, oh, geez. So I'm like, all right, like that's really expensive. I go on my bookshelf at home and I
yeah,
see it there, and I'm like, oh wow. Read through it, I'm like, okay, great. This is amazing, because like I said, I buy books. I just buy them because I have them, and at some point when I absolutely need it, or when I'm like, you get to the point where like, hey, I need to learn about this. I go through it, I'm like, oh, this book would be perfect. So like definitely I'd say like if anyone just buy books. And
yeah.
when you're ready, you'll read them. But get
I,
in the habit of reading like 10 to 20 minutes a day.
I just added that book to my cart where you were saying that
Yeah,
for later.
it's an amazing book. Like Brian Tracy's probably he's the GOAT when it comes to explaining sales. Like I must say, like he has such a monotone way of describing things, but it's like straight, like to the point. Great
Yeah.
speaker. If you ever
Oh,
had a chance to watch him, Brian Tracy.
I
But
will.
like,
I will.
yeah, so, but like definitely I can understand like the growth or being motivated on a regular daily basis. It gets difficult in our job, and also for a trainer. Like training is the one of the hardest jobs because you go through so much. So now,
Mhm.
like, what are your personal values or philosophies that guide your approach to towards managing trainers and clients?
I only have two values and philosophies that I really push on, and the rest fall under that.
Okay,
Like
what are they?
number one is honesty. Like in my with my team, I have a very honest relationship. Like, of course, there's certain things that I can't tell them, and they understand that. Like, like the who's in trouble, the discipline, and like that stuff stays behind closed doors.
Yep.
But there's always an open honesty. I'm like, if you want to know how I'm feeling, you want to know how the club's doing, you want to know how I'm doing, you want to know how sales are doing, like you want to know numbers just to see, you want to know why you haven't gotten a PT starter in a few weeks. Like, ask me, I'll tell you. I'll never lie to you. I'll give you the straight up answer. You might not like it, but you're gonna get it.
Mhm.
But it's like at the same time, I want you to do that for me. And like if I'm gonna ask you these questions, I can't work with somebody who just says good. Okay,
Yep.
no, I'm fine. Like that's just not gonna happen. I need to have that honesty. And if you do something wrong, I need to know. It's not because you're in trouble. It's because if I don't know, I can't fix it or help you fix it. So we gotta
Yep.
have that. And the other one is trust. It's like if I can't trust you, I can't work with you.
Yep.
If I catch you lying to me or lying to people in general, it doesn't have to be me. Like don't lie to trainers, don't lie to clients, don't lie to other managers, don't lie to other employees. Like if I catch you lying in a bad way, I mean like if you got somebody who's really demotivated and they need a little bit of a white lie boost of like, I feel like shit and it's like no, don't worry, you're doing amazing. Like fine. Like you know what, like motivational boost, we all need that sometimes. Sometimes we need a
Yeah.
little like ignorant positivity, I'll call it,
Yep.
instead of lying. But like if you're gonna lie, I can't trust you, and if I can't trust you, I can't keep you on my team because who knows how deep the lies will go,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
It's like
that one's truth right there.
yeah, it's like yeah, maybe you lie about something stupid like why you didn't get your booking potential done or whatever, but if you're willing to lie, that's a trickle effect. If I'm willing to
Yep.
lie about that, I'm willing to lie about a lot more. And the more I get away with it, the more I'm willing to lie about other things. And I don't take that risk. So if I catch him lying, I got a very stern because I know that's not like I don't it's I guess it's like a conduct issue kind of thing, but like I usually give them a good sit down talk and I explain this to them, this exact thing of like if you lie to me, I can't trust you, and if I can't trust you, I can't work with you.
Yeah. It's true though. It's very true because at the end of the day, we're built off trust. So like I got trainers before who will legit tell me things, and the moment that I catch them lying, I'm like, oh, all right, you're done. Like I had one guy literally tell me he was prospecting at a certain time. He didn't realize I was at the club. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then I'm like, so you're prospecting this time, but I'm like walking around, I don't see you. So what are you talking? So can you help me understand what's up? And it was like, oh, it's like, man, like I don't know why you're lying to me. I had one guy literally, we were doing an intern meeting, and he legit said, I'm gonna do I was prospecting between 6 and 7. And I'm like, you were prospecting
Yeah.
between 6 and 7? Yeah. I'm like, so how many people did you talk to? I'm like, I'm sorry, I was out on the floor between 6 and 7, and you weren't there. So why is
Yeah.
that
I
red
didn't see
block
you.
there? And why are you telling me this? Like, it'll be better for you to just tell me the truth and be like, oh man, like I went home, I totally forgot to pick it up. Totally understand. That's cool, man. Don't let it
Yeah.
happen again. But like just lying and trying to make up this excuse of things that didn't happen. Oh man, I totally understand
Exactly.
that.
Like that stuff's the worst. Like, I had a trainer recently actually, like he was prospecting or he had prospecting in his system, and I was in my office, I was on a call, and I just sent him a message about 10 minutes in. This guy's been struggling with prospecting. He's not a bad trainer, but he's having a hard time.
Yep.
And I just asked him, I'm like, yo, is everything going good? Are you okay? Like, I'm in the meeting right now, but if I can help, I will. And he's like, hey, he's like, just gonna be honest with you. Just he's like, I'm not feeling it right now. I remove the red block. Can we meet, do a little bit more practice later? And I'll book it for 6 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, of course. I'm like, I never want you, like, if you don't want to go out and do it, I know we need to, but like, if you're really like, I'm not going to go out and do it, I don't want to pay you to go out and do something and do it so ineffectively that you fail and get in trouble anyways.
Yep.
I'm like, come to me with this and we can reconvene, re-strategize. Maybe that we choose a different version of prospecting until you feel comfortable at that.
Yeah.
I'll take that win any day. Right. And it's like, it's such a small thing, but it goes such a long way because it builds trust. And when you build trust, like, I'll go to bat for you, but I'm not
Yeah.
going to go to bat for you if I can't trust that you're going to tell me the truth.
Facts. I hear you on that. All right. So like, this is the last question.
Yes.
Looking back, what advice would you give your younger self when you first started in the fitness industry?
Oh man, that's I would jump to any opportunities faster. I spent way too much time in the comfort zone. I was like, I
Yeah.
wanted to jump out of trainer into management way earlier than 2018. Like I was 4 years in when I applied for AFM, but the opportunity arose in 2016 and 2017. And I was comfortable as a trainer. I wasn't ready. I was scared. I didn't think I'd be good at it. So I stayed back and I didn't do it until I got to the point where I was so frustrated and I had no choice that I made the jump. And that happened same thing with AFM to FM. I got into these comfort zones where I didn't make the jump early enough. And I worked myself until I got so frustrated with the position that that was my only option to was to take that jump finally and do it. And neither one of those jumps was a mistake. They were both the right call. And if I could go back, I'd tell myself instead of waiting until you're angry to do it or until something triggers you to do it, just do it. Like just go do it. If you want it, go do it. Stop waiting.
Yeah. I
Because
like
who
that.
knows how far along I would have been.
I like that. I like that a lot. All right. Bonus question. I always ask everyone this: what are the top 5 courses that every new trainer should do when they're first starting out? So like it's just more of a thing of like same information. If you were brand new, what are the 5 courses you need to do other than GLPTI or assessment course?
Yeah, other than the necessary Camp Fit Pro and
Yeah.
GLPTI, I got you. I really enjoyed that connected coaching course that we did. I thought that one
Yep.
was like game changer, teaching those conversations. Again, I think everybody needs to do that.
Yep.
I would definitely do something like I would do an online. There's gonna be a hot take. I would do like an online work at your own pace 12-month course to work in the background while I'm doing my live courses.
Yep.
Because I find when I need a little bit of motivation, that one usually jumps on my background. Like right now, I got precision nutrition on the docket. I've been at
Okay.
it for honestly a year and a half because I've just been taking so many other courses that the information overload has been too much.
Yeah.
But I have that one in the back pocket so that whenever I need to return back to an education, if there's nothing going on, I can jump in and do some practicing, and it just gives me a little background motivation.
Yep.
I would do. I loved like the tactical course. I don't know if you did that one, the Alico
I did get
tactical.
to do
Like
that one.
that one was solid. That one was. It's just so different. It's so
Yeah.
different from your normal bars. Like all the things you're taught in every course is, mobility, stability, bands, balls,
Yeah.
bars.
Yeah.
And this was like we're doing jumps, we're doing hops, we're doing twists, we're doing explosives, we're doing
Oh boy.
barbell mixed with kettlebell mixed with sprints.
Oh
And it's
boy.
like it's yeah, it was just I walked in and I'm like, this is all out of my comfort zone again. And I'm like, I love that. So like
Yeah.
any course that's not your average barbell course, I think is a good take to do as a course number 3. Absolutely do a barbell course. With that being said, do something that gets you comfortable with like 1 rep, 3 rep, 5 rep and coaching, because there is going to be a point, and there always is, where your clients want to lift heavy.
Yep.
Even if it's not their goal, once they get a taste of it, I want to lift heavy. I want to lift heavy. So learn
Yep.
how to lift heavy for that. And then I would do a course. The last one would be tough because I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted on this one. Public speaking, if you want to get into teaching, I think is a great course. Learning how to communicate with your audience as opposed to communicate like one-on-one coaching is a good one.
Yep.
If you want to stay in fitness industry, I would always recommend go in something a little bit more on the rehab side of business. So like an ETA or like a DTS level 1 or like an FRC or an FST, because most of your people coming in are going to have some sort of injury or chronic pain. And the more you can learn, the more you'll feel comfortable about working on those things.
That's dope. I like it. I like it a lot. All right. I want to respect our time. I want to respect the listeners' time. Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time to answer some questions. I love connecting with you. I can't wait to redo this. I have fun at the Swiss. I'm jealous because I'm legit like when Ken Kanakin on Instagram was like, how many people want the Swiss? I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like, yes. And then I signed up for my powerlifting competition like way back in spring. And I'm like, okay, I can't wait. I'm going to the Swiss. I'm so happy. I'm like in this right mind frame to like go there. And then Eric asked me, are you going to Swiss? I'm like, of course I am. And then Ken Kanaka releases to November 1st. I'm like, okay, that works. And then he's like, psych, November 2nd. I'm like, Ken, man, why'd you do that to me? Why'd you play me like that?
You did you dirty, bro.
Right? Like,
this is like, and this is perfect for you because you know the lineup at Swiss is always powerlifting, nutrition, and strength and conditioning. So like, I wish you were coming, bro. I got so amped when you posted that post today about going. I was like, yo. And then you're like, I'm not going. I'm like,
yeah, I'll promote it. I'll promote the heck out of it, man. But like, because I like it. I think people should be going there because I think if you're like CanFit's good, but CanFit's good when you're like when you're new. When you need like extra knowledge and you're like, hey, you want to go dig deep. The Swiss is where you want to be at. So like next year, I hope he has it again in Toronto. 1, 2. I'm gonna make sure I don't have any powerlifting. I'm not gonna sign up because I normally sign up for the same one. It's always at Torque, and they always do it around the same time, around this time. So next year, I'm either taking a year off of powerlifting, I'm coaching, or I will probably do an earlier event, probably in the early fall, and do like the Fall Fury versus the Torque one, and travel out to Burlington. That way, I can make sure I'm at the Swiss next year.
Oh man, that'd be dope. You know, I always love catching up at the courses with you. That's most of the fun of our jobs is getting to connect with you guys and hang out on the weekend and like go for food after and have those small conversations that like they really they're game changer, bro. And like I was so happy when you asked me to be on this. I'm like, I want nothing more than to help you out. Like it's solid. I've been listening for a bit, so
thank you, man. That's
super pumped.
Thank you so much. All right, that's it for today. Make sure you guys listen to this. Make sure you guys send this to a friend if you got anything out of this episode. I know you guys got something out of this episode. That's it. Have a good night. Rise and rise.